Today we're going to be talking about patella femoral knee pain. That's a mouthful for me. Christina's eager to see how many times she can make me say that throughout our segment today. But basically, when we're running and exercising, getting active again, it's not uncommon for people to experience knee pain. So Christina's going to tell us a little bit more about how to know whether we're experiencing this kind of knee pain, what might be causing that, and what we can start doing about it. So Christina, without further ado, tell us a little bit more about that mouthful of knee pain.
Yeah. So patellofemoral knee pain is something that I see very commonly in the clinic. It's kind of this blanket diagnosis for knee pain that's happening in the front of the knee. Some people come in and they're kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of around the inside of my kneecap, or it's right along this inside edge, and they kind of just make this circle around this inside of their kneecap there. It's something that when you're running, it's kind of this dull, achy, naggy running pain. But then a lot of times it's when you go to squat down, you get this quick, sharp pain right in the front of your knee, or you're going up the stairs and it kind of just is bugging you every single step. And it tends to be a quicker, sharp pain with those kind of things when we get into a deeper knee bend.
Do people typically have more pain going upstairs or downstairs with patellofemoral knee pain?
This one I tend to see a bit more on the way up the stairs, and when they're coming up out of their squat. So once they kind of get down into that deep knee bend, then they're like, oh, my knee kind of hurts. And then they try to come back out of it, and they get this quick knee pain until they get out of a certain range of motion.
Okay. And so what kind of causes that? Like there's a couple, we had talked previously about a few different types of knee pain. So we're talking about mostly around the kneecap, sort of. Might not be the same in each person, but generally it hurts when we're running or kind of using our knees in a more loaded fashion, versus you were talking about other versions of knee pain that would be like maybe related to your meniscus that might show signs of swelling, or that when you're straightening and bending the knee when it's not loaded they might hurt, or walking might hurt. This seems to be more something when you're doing a little bit more vigorous or loaded activity, you're getting kind of localized pain that doesn't swell in the front of the knee.
So can be, you can feel this if you get into a really extreme quad stretch. People get that sharp pain, but generally once they're just unloaded, moving the knee around, it's not as painful. And like you said, a meniscus or tends to swell on us. It gives us kind of a clicking or catching feeling. This won't do that. And then your major knee injuries tend to be more with a trauma. So.
Okay, right on. So then what things are we looking at that might be, causing trouble that's making this knee pain happen?
Yeah. So because patellofemoral pain happens really when we're not getting appropriate tracking or gliding of your kneecap within its femoral groove. So if you kind of look at your knuckles, you've got this little groove. Your kneecap should kind of slide right up and down there. If we have an imbalance, let's say from the inside of your quad to the outside, like generally the inside might be a little weaker, so the outside of our quad pulls a bit more, that IT band starts to play a role, and we start to get this pull kind of to the side of our kneecap. It's not as dramatic as you dislocate or anything like that. It's just this uneven wear and tearing, and so we get this pain under our kneecap. But that's where we need to start to look at quad length.
Okay, so the quads are the muscles on the front of your thigh there, and it's actually called a quad because quad stands for four. So there's four muscles that kind of work together synergistically to straighten the leg. And so sometimes, even when you're exercising regularly, even with good form and proper technique, you can still end up with the muscles on the outside of your leg being a little bit stronger or more dominant than the ones on the inside of the leg. And then that disparity shifts the kneecap, and it starts to ride basically on a bony surface instead of the slippery articular surface that it's supposed to, create some pain and problem for the exerciser. So what do we do about that? And you were talking about range of motion too. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so if it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be an imbalance between weakness and being stronger, but sometimes it can just be that your quads, if they are too tight, or your hip flexor is too tight and you're not able to bring your heel to your bum and still have your knee pointing towards the ground. And that's a quick and easy way to see, is my hip flexor too tight? Is my quad too tight? And sometimes just that over, that muscle being too tight adds an extra compressive force on the kneecap. So that can
Sure.
contribute to too much wear and tear under the kneecap there.
Okay, so if somebody's standing like on their feet and maybe using a wall for balance or something, they could
Mhm.
grab the laces of their shoe or the top surface of their foot, pull their heel up toward their bum, and then both of their thighs should remain even, right? If their kneecaps pointing straight at the ground, they should be
Yeah.
able to get pretty close to their bum. And something to watch when we're talking about hip flexor and quad is that sometimes we can do that and then our back will arch a lot.
Yeah.
If our back's arching, then we're kind of pulling our pelvis down. So if we can keep our our pelvis, as we talk about this in the gym, if you imagine your pelvis was a bowl of water and you had headlights on the front of your hip bones and you're trying to point the headlights up toward the ceiling while you're pulling your heel. And if you're able to get that close, then you know you have sufficient range. If you're finding that even just a challenge to get into that position, holding your foot or anything like that's probably a good indication that maybe some of the knee pain you're experiencing is a result of the fact that there's just too much tension in and around those joints. I
Yeah.
like that. So could be a strength imbalance, could be range of motion. Is there anything else that we're talking about in terms of looking for culprits, or are we moving on to solutions?
I really look at your ability to fire your glutes. So firing your butt.
And
You know, if
how
if your quads are doing all the work and they're not sharing the load with your bum, then we may have more knee pain as a result from that.
totally. So how do we help people to get their butt in gear? Or how do people, is there a self-assessment that they can do to see whether or not their glutes are working? Or what do you do for that?
I really like a bridge just for a couple of reasons. One, it pushes us into a bit of hip extension, which would put us into, seeing if we have adequate length in our quad and our hip flexors. But
Hmm.
if you do a bridge and you do not feel like your bum is the driver in that action, then, we need to change how you're doing that so that you actually feel your butt. Like you shouldn't feel that in your low back. You shouldn't only feel this in the front of your thighs or your quads. Like you shouldn't feel like your hamstrings are going into spasm. Like you should feel like
Right.
your butt's doing something.
Okay, so when you're laying on your back with your knees bent and your feet
Mhm.
flat on the floor, you lift your bum up, kind of keeping that headlight up action. You hold that for maybe 30 seconds or something. Just notice which muscles you feel like are doing most of the work. If you feel it kind of behind your legs, those are your hamstrings just above your knees, then maybe that might be an indication that your butt cheeks aren't working enough. If you feel it in your butt cheeks, that's a good sign. If you're feeling in your lower back, again, a sign that maybe we need some help getting the butt cheeks on board.
Mhm.
Right on.
Yeah.
So now we have a couple of tools to be like, yeah, I've got some knee pain. Okay, I've looked at the range of motion. What kind of beginner things can people start doing at home before they see a professional like yourself or coming to us at Envision to help them recreate some of that balance? What might people be able to do at home to start helping themselves?
Yeah, if your knee is right now, it's only bugging you a little bit, and you can mostly, function, and it's not, at the forefront of your brain the whole time. Then I would really get into, can you foam roll through your quads, or stretching, like Carrie said, pulling your heel up towards your bum and actually getting your knee to be pointed towards the ground. Um,
Mhm.
that's a good place to start, is just getting into range of motion, stretching your hip flexors, stretch your hamstrings. We do ignore the tightness in our hamstrings sometimes, but that does play a role in how much just irritation we get at the knee. So starting with the basics there, make sure everything has the ability to move as it should, before we just start trying to blast into strength, because you're not going to get an efficient pull on a stiff, tight muscle and joint.
Absolutely. From our perspective in our profession, strength is adding tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we don't have requisite or enough range of motion, then adding strength can actually make a problem worse. I mean, strength and stability kind of work together with mobility, right? It's an equal partner relationship.